Good evening and welcome to the virtual world of literature from Prabha Khitan Foundation, which in Ahmedabad is supported by the Karma Foundation as literary partner, Ehsas Women, Mangalwar Gallery as hospitality partner, and Divya Bhaskar as media partner. The virtual platform is created to fit into the new normal. As the world struggles to cope with the pandemic, the Foundation has ensured that book lovers are not deprived of their love for a good read and the opportunity to interact with eminent wordsmiths. Reconstructing the sessions to go online literally brought the world closer as overseas and national attendees can now log on to sessions simultaneously. The Foundation weaves together nearly 30 cities in India and abroad through impeccably curated interactive sessions, which goes to initiate various women empowerment and other development programs. The Right Circle is one such endeavor where patrons and members get to interact with English authors and converse on their life and work. The Right Circle Ahmedabad is delighted to host writer Amandeep Sandhu. Having completed his master's in literature from University of Hyderabad, he attained diploma in journalism from Asian School of Journalism. In 2013, he joined Academy Schloss Solitude, Stuttgart, Germany, for a 2-year fellowship. Amandeep debuted with his book Punjab: Journeys Through Fault Lines. His second novel, a semi-autobiography, Roll of Honor, was nominated for Hindu Literary Prize for Best Fiction in 2013. His other book, Sepia Leaves, too, has been well received. Amandeep dabbles in both media and anthologies. To do the conversation with him, we have Janvi Sonaiya. So now sit back, relax, and enjoy the session.
Yeah. So, Amandeep, I hope, first of all, I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
So, before we get into the Q&A, I just want to read out the lines that you have written at the starting of your book, Punjab Through the Fault Lines. You wrote it in Punjabi, the lines of Aman Rose.
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah, please.
I'm fascinated how famous you are in Ahmedabad.
Oh.
You know, because there was an introduction given for me, but for you it was like Janvi Sonaiya, and that's nice.
This is your day. I mean, I can.
No, it is yours too. It is yours too. And hello to everybody listening.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining in. Yeah.
So, Aman, I love those lines. What you know of me, my dear, I'm not that. I mean, I was thinking, you wrote these lines in Punjabi in your book, but I was just pondering over these lines yesterday. And when the topic is Punjab, you also spoke in one of your interviews that I'm an insider, but also an outsider. So first of all, to just set the mood, tell us about your relationship with Punjab. I mean, your conflicts with it, your love for it, and why do you love to go back to the same place again and again, be it physically or be it through your words?
What is the answer for why do you love your blood? The blood that flows in your veins. That is the only marker I have of Punjab. Because I was born in Odisha, I lived all around the country. I now live in Bangalore. And yet my blood under my skin is Punjabi because my parents were Punjabi. So there is a strange draw that you want to understand the texture of your blood. You want to understand the people who share this blood with you. And you look at Punjab, and I have looked at Punjab for many decades, and I have just found contrarian ideas about the place. There is, on the one hand, there is the langar and there is the gurdwaras and the work that the Sikhs do. And on the other, there is militancy and there is, Khalistan, and there are ideas like that. Then there is music, which is immensely popular, and there is food, which is immensely popular as Gujarati food, perhaps, and there are costumes. I mean, all women all over the country now wear salwar kameez. And so you see that there is this penetration of Punjab in the cultural consciousness of the country, but it does not really reflect in the discourse on Punjab that you look at newspapers or you even look at books. There was something missing in them. There was some gap there. And I thought, okay, let me try to fill that gap.
And That's how.
And that's what drew me to Punjab. Now, for a person who is from Punjab, that person has memory, the memory of childhood, the memory of adolescence. You know where the road of your house ends, where there is a village pond, what is the music in what season. But for somebody who is not born in Punjab, you don't have that memory. And so then you have only a memoir. You have the idea of, your being in that place for short or long stints throughout your life, but you don't have a complete picture of it. So it was this fragmentation in my head, which again pushed me to go and fill the gaps with this book.
When we read your book, when we read what you write, there is a feeling of longing. There is some angst when you write it. Yeah, there is information and data and all of that. But do you still feel that there's a lot of angst? There's a different sort of longing for that place, which also compels you to write more about it.
Yeah. So when we were writing the text on the inside page of the cover, my editor asked me for 2-3 samples and then chose the word black hole, the black hole called Punjab in your heart,
Oh.
And I think that is very much a part of my relationship, at least with Punjab, that I can never really feel that I know everything about the place. In fact, after writing the book, I feel I know almost nothing about the place. My original idea was you draw up a book proposal, you travel around, meet people, eat good food, and you come back and you write the book. But then it just drew me in deeper and deeper. And I now realize that Punjab that we are looking at in India from the Indian perspective is actually just 1/7 of the larger landmass called Punjab. And this landmass was a gateway forever in history. It has been the gateway through which Central Asians, Scythians, Huns, Mongols have all entered the Indian subcontinent. So the character of Punjab is actually of a gateway. And there is always longing on the gateway. You want to get somewhere, you want to reach somewhere. And because you're not happy just being on the gate, you want to go. And Punjab remains a gateway forever. And so that is one of the reasons why there will be longing. And also I'll be saying too much if I say it, but I think I should, is that if you look at all the classics that have emerged from Punjab, whether it is Heer Ranjha or Sassi Punnu or Soni Mahiwal, all of them are love poems. Yeah. All of them are about longing, Yeah. So it was just natural that I would also end up doing a work which does evoke longing,
Okay. Yeah. And you very correctly said that there is a lot of stereotyping also when it comes to representing Punjab, be it through the food, be it through the way people speak, be it through their dressing sense, all of it. And as an outsider, I would know a picture of Punjab, but in one of your interviews, you gave a statement that don't you think it will be a good idea to look at Punjab through its mental asylum? And that is a very strong statement. So tell us that what research doesn't goes. Consider that you are an insider, you know Punjab really well, but as a researcher, what is your process in writing this book and making sure that it is factual, or making sure that it represents a Punjab which people don't know about and they should know about?
Yeah. So it is... my journey as a writer started with a book in which I wrote about schizophrenia, which ran in my family. And my mother was diagnosed as schizophrenic, that is Sepia Leaves. So culturally, geographically, I try to write about Punjab. All 3 books have been about that. Most of the entries and anthologies have also been about Punjab. But in my mind, I am also looking at mental health at all times.
Okay.
And so that is what... everybody needs somewhere to stand, and mental health or an asylum is not the place where you can stand, but at least if you feel safe in an asylum, and I do feel safe because I've lived with mental illnesses all my life, I think that's a good place to look at society around you.
Okay.
And as far as research goes, now there was a limitation that for the last few years, the government has banned interviews from jail inmates and inmates of mental asylums. This was after that documentary came out, on the Nirbhaya case. It was the BBC documentary. So, but I did have access to a lot of private hospitals because of sepia leaves. Doctors knew me and they knew what I look at. I'm not looking at stereotyping madness. I'm actually looking at the people's stories there. So it was my good fortune that I could go into asylums. And that chapter on the book, I actually put it up as the framework to look at Punjab, and I thought it was a good thing to do for people to also understand what is going on here. Plus, there is a narrative, not a very old one, but now at least a decade old, of Punjab being the drug hotspot of India, though actually statistics are different. I describe that as well. But then mental health and drug addiction, they complement each other in some ways as fields of study. My way of looking at it is really, in some ways, what you do as a journalist. So there is reportage. But then I was writing for a couple of magazines while I was traveling. These days, media does not have enough money to spend on reporters. So since I was traveling, so media asked me to report for them. I said, okay, and that gives me some money to actually travel around.
So writing and reporting went along for you.
Yeah. So that actually, the series of articles I did for a magazine, Caravan, they sort of form the spine of the book in many ways.
Yeah.
I'm also writing for Scroll, for Hindustan Times, for Business Line, and various other places.
But sorry to interrupt, but Aman, is it true that during your process you got threats from politicians and terrorists?
We'll come to that. So after doing the travel and after I was seeing it from a particular time, from the winter of 2015 to the state election in 2017 in February, and I realized, okay, I have a lot of words written and they're all published. So why do I need a book? Like if this is done, this is done. And then I realized that most of the stories were timely, but they did not tell the context of why what was happening where it was happening. What was the sacrilege about? I mean, there was a huge furor about the sacrilege of religious texts. Or they don't tell why the Aam Aadmi Party, for example, which tried to make a debut in Punjab but could not win enough seats there. What happened to that? So the why is missing in our reporting most of the time, because the nature of reporting is what, it is not why. So I try to layer the reporting with the why question, everywhere giving contextual history. And then I said, this reads like a textbook, like why should it become a book still? And that is where I went into my memoir and trying to connect everything that was happening with what I had experienced in an earlier time in the state. And that set up a nice contrast about how I knew the tube wells used to be there, or how I knew the fields were green, or what was the role of the hand pump in the city, like small things like that. But that is memoir. So the book then becomes a mixture of travelogue, travel reportage, contextual history, and memoir.
Yeah, I mean, a mix of all of it.
Yeah, that's why it's an inter-genre book in many ways.
Yeah, so that is it when it comes to a research. And then the question I was really eager for, I mean, like as a journalist, Aman, I understand the pressure that a writer has when writing something which talks about power, which talks about government, and takes a very strong stand. Many a times as a reporter, we are not able to write the stories. We have to keep it to ourselves because there's a lot of pressure that we come across. But you have very courageously taken a stand and given data, given facts about it, done ground level reporting. So tell me, were you ever scared? Did you ever try to be diplomatic when you were writing, or you just wanted to put the information out without giving it a second thought?
No, see, because of Punjab's very convoluted historical events, and this we go back to partition and then the period of militancy, And now when the state is really eroded, nothing has really got solved. Militancy was actually such a bloodshed that happened in the 80s, 90s, but nothing came out of it. Nothing got solved. There is a lot of disquiet in Punjab. There is a lot of anger among people. And so simple interviewing itself becomes a process of walking through a landmine. You don't know who will respond to you how. And many people did feel like, why are you asking this question? Or what is your take in this? Or which party do you belong to? Or, and I kept telling them that I will record you only if you permit me to record. I'm not going to put anything that I've heard many more things that I couldn't put in the book because I couldn't record them, And I came very clear to people. I'm just saying I'm trying to understand you, and I'm trying to understand your anger as well, because as a writer, as a reporter, I can understand the limitations. I traveled with a lot of reporters, and I knew they have the deadline by 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, file the story by 10 o'clock, look at the playback of it and approve it or whatever. I was writing for media, but I was not under a pressure of this kind by an editor sitting on my head and saying, file, file, file. That I was not doing. Okay. So there was that space for me in that. I would file when I felt sure about a story.
But no, Aman, did you feel
saying things? So saying things, I personally, I feel if I have to curb myself from saying what I want to say, then I better not write. Okay. And if I don't write, then I'm not a writer, So I've never really held back from saying what I thought is important. But here I would like to qualify that my comments, and the book is full of those political comments, are not against people. They're not even against parties. They are a way of understanding the historical processes which have brought us to this point. Yes. So whether it is that time the current Chief Minister of Punjab or the new Chief Minister now, if I'm pointing at things, it is because there is a need to put it out in front of everybody, that this is the data, this is how things have happened or not happened, and this was the promises you made and you betrayed them. So if you are back with facts and figures, and I'm not really like talking about, a slip of tongue or I'm looking at the intention of these politicians when they try to, honestly, it's a very polished conversation, but honestly, when they try to screw people, And that happens a lot in Punjab. And so I needed to see it. And that is why it is supposedly a bold book. But there is a caveat to that, is that we are now translating it into Punjabi. And everybody tells me, okay, the English book passed muster. When it comes in Punjabi, then you will need gunmen to save you, because many could get angry,
I have to compliment that. It's a very courageous stand that you have taken, because even in today's times, to even call a spade is a big deal. And you've done that.
Yeah, but then I mean, why am I a writer?
Yeah,
if I can't say what I want to say, then I'm betraying the very purpose of being a writer. How can I do that?
And then talking about your another book, Sepia Leaves, where you write about your mother suffering from schizophrenia, or you write about, say, getting harassed when you were in hostel. I mean, the aspect. So tell me, was it your catharsis? Because it's a very vulnerable point when a writer is writing something of that sort. So what was your state of mind when you were writing this?
State of mind was really beaten down. I was at a point in my life where I was just completely, the stigma attached around mental health can take a huge toll on family members as well, not only on the patient, And I suffered that stigma all my life. And I was tired of it. I was fed up of it. And then I thought of writing this book and basically stripping and lying down on the road and say, okay, run me down, but this is me. This is who we are, and we think we have a story. I firmly believe that all human beings have a story, And when they feel that their story is heard, then they feel satisfied. And when they feel that their story is not heard or their story is told wrongly, then they feel angry. Okay. And there wasn't actually any text on what mental health issues do to a family in India. And that's why I wrote that book. I say, okay, understand that this is also people. This is also what we are going through, and by God's grace or whatever, the book was very, very well accepted. And I still, it is 13 years, I still get 2 or 3 messages a month. And most of them are just thank you. And I'm like, why thank you? And they say, we are caregivers. We thought we don't have a story. The whole story is of the patient. I said, no, caregivers have a story. So how do you keep the integrity of a story? How can you, lie and keep the integrity of a story? You can't do that. The story demands truth. And it demands you be vulnerable to write it.
True. Yeah, I think, and just being honest with yourself and your readers.
Yeah.
And Aman, I also want to understand that you've dabbled into different jobs, and you worked in a farm, to being a journalist, to being a tuition teacher. So tell us about the impact of all those works on how you write now, or how has it shaped you as a person?
Well, yes, because when I come from a dysfunctional family, and money is always a crisis. And it was also that I thought my father is too burdened with what is going on in the family. I can't burden him by asking him for money for small things that I need. And so he never stopped me from asking, or he never said no to anything. But I just felt that, and this is also a problem. This is not a nice thing. As a child, I felt that I have to be parent to my parents, so I can't really ask them for things that I want. But then the only way to do that was to earn it myself. And that is why I did those jobs, whether I taught tuitions or farmhand was in our family ancestral land. But even there is something interesting, because I was born in Odisha and I spoke Hindi. The migrant workers who would come to Punjab, they would often be at a loss on how to speak to these Sikh landlords. Hindi and Punjabi are close, but they are not the same language. And Punjabis think that they will just latkaify the Hindi a little bit and the Punjabi, and it will become Hindi. It doesn't work like that, So I would most often become the translator between the landlords and the migrant labor, negotiating their price, negotiating how many days they can stay, how much work there is. So that gave me a sense of who are these people we live with. I was thrown out of this regular middle class family fairly enough, early enough in life. And so that concern remains with people.
Yeah, and Aman, in your process of writing this book, you must have did something which was a mistake, or you felt that it could have been done better. So, are there any things, any list, or any few tips that you would give to people who want to write a book which includes data and research and taking a political stand? So, anything that you would want to share from your experience?
No, there is something important here, is that when we say the word data, we assume that data is easily available. It is not. It is not. And so data has to be culled from various things, So like in the drafts of this book, if you look at those folders, I have thousands and thousands of news clippings, which I read through, picked out data from here, there, compared it with each other, and then came to numbers, which I have quoted in the book. So it is very important to do the due diligence, because between the government and between the interested parties and between universities who are looking at the same sphere, for example, agrarian indebtedness in Punjab, there are various numbers floating around. So which number do you choose? So that is something that is very important.
That's very important.
Second is to try to get under the skin of whatever you are working on, because
not just looking in the shallow way, but
yes, because and I had decided for myself while doing this book that it's almost like everybody in Punjab knows everything. You can't do an interview in 20 minutes there. Everybody takes 3 hours of your time, and they're telling you the same things again and again with a little variation from each other. So it's like mind-boggling. It tires you. I couldn't do more than 2 interviews a day in the 150 days I was traveling there. I have around 700-800 hours of interviews. You know,
Okay.
and I looked at all of that and I realized this is not the book. This can't be the book, because most of what is said, always has a person saying behind it, and that person has a politics to him.
Yeah.
And we have to cut through that politics and reach the essence of things. So
True.
it takes time again. It has to be,
Yeah.
well, the only advice is hard work or ear to ground, or trying to listen to the vibrations and
Yeah.
not only look at the things that are being said to you. So that is very important to do.
Very important.
And about emotional side, as I said earlier, I think it's good to become vulnerable.
Yeah.
It,
I think that's a
to
superpower.
consider your white pages in front of you to be a safe space, and to trust your editor to be able to guard your your sense of truthfulness, and then discuss with the editor and see what to keep, what to remove. Like, that's fine.
True, true. And sorry to keep the question long, but I'll have to read what the few lines that you write in your epilogue. You write, one generation lost to military, the next to drugs, and the present to exodus. Are looking for, and they all are looking for new directions, new voices, and new leadership. So tell us, what do you hope for next when it comes to your favorite subject and when it comes to your own personal life? Like, what do you aspire for now?
Oh, no. uh, for Punjab, my hope is, and the hope crystallized as I was writing the book, was that we start looking at Punjab not as just a region or just a people, but we actually look at it as a post-conflict region, and we apply what worldwide is done for post-conflict people to solve the angst and the bitterness that they have imbibed over decades. And this, otherwise, a mere process of voting and elections, it gives you a leadership of some sort, but the leadership is not committed to working for people. And you have to keep people happy. It's a border state. It is a very critical state for the country as well. Like, you can't keep thundering upon them all the time. You need to listen to their voices and solve their problems. And most problems are not very big. But there is a larger thing of justice which is hanging on them, because of the militant years and all that. So if you look at Punjab as first you acknowledge what people are saying. And if you acknowledge it, then you don't do it superficially. You
Yes,
then try to solve what they are asking for.
Yeah.
And most of it is justice. It is a question of justice. For myself, very frankly, when I was in Germany, I drafted a novel, and I was distracted from it, and I started writing this book because I felt it was more urgent. And I hope that in the lockdown I can finish that book, but I honestly could not. I actually could not even open it and start working on it. I did many other things. I learned cooking. A cat adopted us. That was very nice, and we took to gardening in a big way, but my wife and I. But I could not work on that book. Now I'm coming up with another book, which I think is more important to write in this phase. It is going back to mental health, is to look at what has the pandemic done to the mental health of the country itself. And because I firmly now look at it and I feel that the pandemic has sparked an epidemic in India, of another kind. And once a vaccine is found, and once things change in a few months, everybody will forget what we went through as a society at this point in time. And I think it is very important to document it, and to then urge the government, whichever government, state and center, to invest and create a better public health infrastructure for the country, because that is what we need the most.
I think mental health is a big topic that you rightly put it out, and I think we should discuss about it and share our feelings as much as we can. And when it comes to mental health and thinking, in one of your interviews, you also said this line, and I'll quote you. You said that I have a very screwed up way of looking at the world, but I love it, so no complaints. So please elaborate on it. Like, how do you look at the
No,
world.
screwed up is, I must have said it lightly, but I don't remember saying
Okay.
it. I own it. If you heard it, I own it. But it is just that people look at things very literally.
Okay.
And I realize that you almost don't learn anything by looking at things literally. You have to look at the deep roots of why things are happening. And
Okay.
once you start looking at that, then your whole understanding of things changes.
Okay.
So screwed up is screwed up in relationship to the world. Not in my sense, it is a clearer, deeper focus on why
Yeah.
things are what they are.
Yeah.
So that's the screwed up.
And I mean, in all your books, I mean, the books you write are not like what to say, a matter of fiction. It needs a lot of hard work. It's also a lot challenging when it comes to emotions or when it comes to just going on the field. So tell us about the toughest day during your process. I mean, if you could just
In
tell
the
us
in the
about
process of writing this book,
in,
Punjab, I went into depression.
yeah.
I mean, the Punjab's mental health affected me also. I mean, if anybody says mental health is not contagious, to me it was.
Okay.
Looking at the anger, the discontent, the sadness, the gloominess, the widows of the farmers who have committed suicides, the mothers and fathers of the boys who were picked up by police, killed, and looking at things and realizing that nothing has changed in the last half century, I became very sad and I went into depression.
Okay.
And I have a lovely doctor, and he and I worked. And by the time the book was coming out, I was coming out of depression as well. But in many, many ways, I feel that I write myself out of depression, and that is a good way of doing things. Like it's not like so. So for me, that is very important. And the second most important thing about this work is that whatever I say, whatever I understood, whatever is there in the book, it would not have been possible without the immense kindness of the people who hosted me for 150 days and nights. I would reach any village, I would reach any town, and I would just ask mostly anybody, that person wouldn't have known me before the day I'm interviewing him. Say,
Yeah.
I just want to spend the night here. And they would easily host me, and give me a good food to eat, good bed to sleep on, pack my breakfast for the next day. And this kindness that I experienced in Punjab was very touching for me.
Okay.
And I think that is the sense of gratitude I have for the people.
Yeah, and Aman, I have to share this that many a times people unnecessarily romanticize writers and poets and painters, and they think that it's a thing that people do when they are in mood. People need a place to write, probably a cafe. But I was looking at an interview by author Dan Brown, and he said that he religiously sits before his laptop from morning 4 a.m. to morning 11 a.m. That's a ritual he follows for 365 days. So tell me that, is it right to romanticize writers, or do you also follow discipline and ritual when it comes to your writing process?
I'm more of tilt towards Dan Brown kind of sitting down, because Socrates says there is divine intervention and the poet writes his poetry, which is very nice. It's very good to hear, but perhaps they are better poets than me. But for me, it is all sitting down and putting yourself there, writing, but cutting much more, constructing sentences and editing them out of it.
Yeah.
I collect thousands and thousands of sentences and then I throw them all out. Even in this book, my editor threw out 80,000 words. So imagine how much bigger this book would have been. But it is just the process. There is no doubt about that in my mind. Inspiration would be a nice thing, but perspiration is what makes a book.
Yeah. And I've also read, I think it was only Dan Brown who said that your readers don't pay for the words you write. Your readers pay you for the words you don't write. I mean, for the words that you throw in the dustbin.
Yes.
And another example that I want to give you is about, there is a film critic called A.O. Scott. He writes for New York Times. And he said that you have to keep your readers, your viewers engaged. You can be writing the best of the things, like you can be giving the most important of information, but if it's not engaging enough, your book will not be a success. So tell me how much you had to work on your writing style. I mean, you have a great story. You have all your emotions in place. But when it comes to the lucidity of writing, does that also make a big part, a huge integral part of your writing process?
So there are two things here. One is that every book I try to learn from writing. It's my sadhana. You know, it's not something that comes easy to me. In fact, I'm one of those writers to whom writing comes the most difficult. You know, talking is easier, writing is much more difficult. But I look at it as something where I want to learn from. So when I want to learn from it, then it doesn't matter how long it takes or what happens in the process, because I'm learning from it. You know, but then there is also an aspect of, when we say engagement, I take it take it as a very important word, because most of my early days of writing, most of the writers I would meet would constantly talk about writing as entertainment.
Okay.
And I always believed that my books are not going to make people happy. You know, my books are not going to make people dance. You know, like my books are actually serious stuff.
To read, I have to say that they're very heart-wrenching in a way that
Yes, because I believe that writing is not entertainment, writing is engagement. And I am trying to engage with the world around me, and I'm trying to distill my understanding of it, put it in books, and I hope it makes you engage with your words. So that is what I'm trying to do with my writing. I'm not trying. So that is very, very important to me. And when I'm trying to do that, then one of the ways is to, of course, put yourself out, keep chopping your heart and keep putting it into the text, you know. But then you will run out of your heart also. No? How much more heart do you have? You know, but then it is to make things honest and make things truthful to everybody who reads it. And once they read it and they understand it, then they realize that, you know, they are engaging with you. And so the lucidity comes from a subconscious process that I evoke in my readers, by which, see, writing is very much an act of trust.
Okay.
It is, to me, it is completely an act of trust. The first line of a book that a reader reads tells you whether the reader will read on for the next 3 pages, 10 pages, 15 pages, and then slowly 50 and 100 and 500 pages or not.
Aman, when you say that writing is an act of trust, do you mean that just being authentic to yourself, like
No. The very act of writing is an act of trust. You are trying to establish with the reader that he can listen to your voice.
Yeah.
That what you will say will not be misleading. That what you will say is something that the person can bank on. That what you say, the person can trust. Because if you lose the trust of the reader, then you are lost it. Then there is no point in writing. I know much writing happens in the world which people don't trust. Today, people don't trust media. People don't trust facts and figures that come everywhere, you know. But where do you create these spaces of trust?
Yeah.
And subconsciously, when you create places of trust, you create safe spaces, you know. And safe spaces is what mental health is all about. You know, that people can feel that they are in a room with you, they are interacting with you, and they are feeling safe. That creates the engagement for people.
Yes, so I think that when it comes to writing style, for you, it's not just about entertainment. It's about engagement. It's about leaving your audience with lot more questions than answers, to just make them think. And I think
to make them reflect.
Yeah, reflect on what.
So this is a book about Punjab, but it echoes a lot of what is going on in the country, in the world as well. Because Punjab is not like some other place or some other planet. It is part of this country. It is part of this planet. There are people here. There are people everywhere. The stories cannot be very, very vastly different. But what happened to these particular people? What at that time was happening to the other people? It gives people a sense of belonging to Punjab. So there is longing, but that longing creates a sense of belonging for me.
Okay.
So, and that's why readers buy it or buy the arguments that I'm making.
True, true, true.
I hope they buy the books also. So,
I have full trust that Aman, your book will survive the test of time because you have written about an issue which will be relevant, which will make people think for ages. So yeah, I mean, coming to another question, I've read that you are what you read. I mean, to write one good book, you have to read like 10 other things, 10 other books. So tell me, which are the books, which are the authors that have influenced you a lot, which you will recommend all of us to just read, or any books that you are reading now?
no, that's a very, very
Not
tricky
the
area
right
to get
question.
into. But let me just mention 2 or 3 big influences on me. Primarily, it is John Steinbeck and The
Okay.
Grapes of Wrath. When I read it, I realized, oh, he's writing about me. He's writing about a farming family, and it felt very liberating to see stories of people like me in a book form. I was very, very taken up by that. The end of that actually hit what to me is my solar pellets, and I was like, and that was like, I want to be a writer. And before that, Khushwant Singh had done it with Train to Pakistan,
Yeah, this is
which I remember reading in a train journey. Rohinton Mistry did it for me
okay.
with his big fat emergency book. I forget what's A Fine Balance.
Okay.
Amitav Ghosh did it for me with Shadow Lines.
Okay.
But the person I really hold as somebody who told me how to write is a guy called Ryszard Kapuscinski. He was a Polish journalist, and he was one of those few people who in the Iron Curtain times had permission to travel around the world and write stories. This is when USSR was there, and they were like, they had clamped down on East Europe. So he is a Polish journalist
Can
who
you
is
repeat it?
traveling. I will not be able to spell it. I'll send you because it's a very complex Polish. But the way you say it is Ryszard Kapuscinski.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he wrote The Emperor, for example, on Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. He wrote The Shah of Shahs as the Iran Revolution was happening. And so he covered a lot of Africa and then Latin America, some parts of Asia. He covered 27 revolutions in his lifetime. He was given the death sentence 4 times. He was mobbed in number of times, But he created a kind of journalism which mixes reportage with history, with his experiences. And he became sort of somebody. I went to Warsaw. By that time he had passed away, but I met his widow and interviewed her. And she was also a doctor. I mean, like, she was a pediatrician in East Europe in those days, in the 50s, 60s, which was very difficult to be. But Ryszard Kapuscinski always believed that you should have read at least 1,000 books to be able to write one book. So it's not 10, it is 1,000. Because there is a lot of things available in the world, and we must know it before we embark on a subject or an area.
Yeah.
And that is another tip to you asked me earlier to writers who want to write about a place. I believe personally that India is at that point in its history where we should have biographies of the states. We should have more and more biographies of the states. Each state needs to tell who they are, what they are, and preferably 2 or 3 biographies so that people can then make an informed understanding of it. Because there is immense diversity in the country and it is just getting lost, So to writers, then it is read a lot, because you learn a lot, and most of the things that you want to write about are already written about. So it will give you a chance to actually explore more things. So reading is a very important part of writing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very important part, to see what's actually written, and then you look for other things, other topics to write on. Yeah.
Yes.
I think Priyanshi is joining us.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask you that, except of the things that you've written, is there a particular incident, experience, or a person whose story or that entire experience you would want to share with the world that you've not done yet, but you wish to?
I don't think I did this. There is a farmer leader called Sukhdev Kokri Kala. There are many instances, but something about him touched me very deeply, and that was that he leads a farmer group. Nowadays, farmers and labor are getting together, which is a very good thing to agitate for their demands and all that. But he's also a fantastic translator himself. He's a retired chemistry teacher. He's above 70 years of age. And when I interviewed him, he was talking about a lot of things that happened between him and the police and the agitations and how the state looks at such agitations. And then in between, at one point, he said, I even broke my leg once. So I said, how did you break your leg? And he said, oh, no, it was deliberate. I mean, like the DSP hit my leg and I fell down. And then he ordered constables to pick me up. And then he ordered them to keep hitting that shin of his right leg again and again and again till it broke. I was like, what? He said, yeah, they deliberately broke my leg. And then they threw me in prison for many months. And I tried to, and he was being completely genuine. Huh? He was not lying to me. I said, who was the DSP? And he genuinely does not remember the person. This to me was the greatest compassion that you can have for others. That you don't remember who did violence to you. But you keep standing against injustice, but you don't remember who is doing the violence to you. He's actually erased that person out of his head. I was very moved when I heard this. And I understood that the fight for rights, the fight for justice need to be carried out in a very different way than how we normally make it targeted towards people or targeted towards things. You know? That was a very moving moment for me.
Thank you. It has been of immense.
I'll give you another example. I was, when the Uri attack happened and I was traveling around the border and looking at what is going on there, you must know that what happens on the border is not at all what happens in national television and all that. You know, the rhetoric is completely dissimilar to each other. At the border, people are really concerned, you know, like they will be bombed, they will be killed. And it is they who have helped the Indian army again and again to win our battles. And most people were saying, no, we know those people across. Their fields are joined with our fields. Of course, there is this fencing and there is a wire and all that, but we know those people. And, you know, so, but finally I met one guy near a pakoda stall and he said, Paji, Patrakar hoon. Are you a journalist? I said, yes. He said, I have a request to you. I said, yeah, what? He said, ladai lagwa do. I said, what? Why are you saying that to me? He said, nahi, if you can, na ladai lagwa do. I said, but why? He said, at least I will have some entertainment in my life. I will look at all those rockets flying. I will look at all those bombs falling. And there will be something happening in my life. My miserable life has nothing happening in it. We on the border don't have jobs. We don't get food. We don't have water. You know, we don't get our crops regularly. At least something will happen and I'll have a story to tell my children. So that is also the mindset of Punjab. You
know? Wow, that was actually something.
Yes.
Both the examples, they were. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, that was very interesting, Amandeep ji, Janvi, Sonaya. Wonderful session, so enlightening. I think it opened up a whole lot of things. The stereotypical Punjab that we know of, the colorful turbans and the boisterous music and the lip smacking food, and there's this whole other side to Punjab that you told us about. So that was very enlightening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janvi. And I would also like to thank the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, the Ehsaas Women, the Karma Foundation, which is a literary partner in Ahmedabad, the Mangalbagh Gallery by the House of MG, which is a hospitality partner, and Divya Bhaskar, which is the media partner. And of course, all the attendees, thank you very much for joining in today's session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank
It
you.
was lovely
Thank you so
talking to
much.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Thank you.